Every year in Ontario, 1 in 6 hospitalizations involve sepsis, and 1 in 20 involve severe sepsis, which carries a much higher risk of death. Sepsis is the body's extreme reaction to an infection, when the immune system goes into overdrive and starts damaging its own tissues and organs. It can strike anyone, often outside of a hospital, and progress incredibly fast, turning a routine infection into a life-threatening emergency. Time is critical. Delays in understanding how a patient's blood is flowing or how they're responding to treatment can mean the difference between life and death. Yet in Ontario, hospitals face additional challenges. The province lacks sepsis-specific policies and guidelines, and training for sepsis care is limited. Current monitoring tools like ultrasound machines are invasive, slow, and often require multiple staff, making rapid response difficult. So how can new technologies help clinicians respond faster and save more lives? Welcome to Where Next Happens, a podcast sharing stories of Ontario's innovators and entrepreneurs. I'm Dr. Claudia Kreviazuk, President and CEO of the Ontario Centre of Innovation. Joining me today is Dr. Joe Eibl, co-founder of Flosonics Medical, a Sudbury-based medtech startup that developed the FloPatch, the world's first wearable, wireless ultrasound device for monitoring critically ill patients. Dr. Eibl leads the company's technology, intellectual property, and business strategy, helping clinicians get real-time data when every second counts. Hi, Joe. It's fantastic to have you here with us today. So why don't we get started? I would love to hear about the origin story behind Flosonics. What sparked the idea?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Claudia. And it's a real privilege to be here. Flosonics, like many startup stories, started long before the company was founded. I attended the University of British Columbia in the early 2000s. And my roommate, the guy I met on the first day of university, lived across the hall from me, became fast friends, and he ended up going on to a career in medicine, trained at UBC, then U of T, then NYU, then out to Stanford. And he went into critical care medicine. And, we stayed in touch all along. That's probably a 15-year journey or some version of many years in the making. And my background was a little bit more on the science side, but similar grad studies, postdoc. And then he was just started practice in New York. And my father fell ill, had a big heart attack, went into the hospital. Thankfully, they were able to sort him out, and he ended up getting open heart surgery. Great news, he's doing fine today, but post-surgery, he developed sepsis, ended up becoming very sick. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And during the process, he ended up getting 16 liters of fluid, intravenous fluid, during his early resuscitation in sepsis. So, it used to be the prevailing thought that aggressive fluid resuscitation was incredibly important in sepsis to help people with low venous return or low blood pressure that comes from the inflammatory response to sepsis, to increase the volume in the system, increase venous return, and basically increase cardiac output, which perfuses the vital organs, distributes antibiotics, and helps the patient heal. And that's relatively correct in patients with a healthy heart. But like so many patients that come into the hospital with underlying cardiopulmonary pathologies like heart failure, or in my dad's case, just having his heart replumbed with open heart surgery, he couldn't handle that additional volume, ended up getting fluid overloaded during the process. And I was talking to John, I'm not sure if you've seen somebody that's in overt fluid overload, but they look a lot like the Michelin Man. If you've
Wow.
seen, the swollen lungs get flooded with water, the heart gets congested, they end up on dialysis. Very, very sick, very serious, increased morbidity, mortality, length of stay in the hospital. So I was talking to John, who is my co-founder in Flosonics, the guy that I was talking about from university, about, what was going on, why was he so swollen? What was the challenge? And he said, hey, this is something that we deal with all the time It's very complex. It's a very hard thing to manage, and we don't have great tools to know if we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing for our patient, but we do our best. And I kind of put that away, and went back to the lab, went back to work. A couple weeks later, my dad thankfully got discharged and went home. But it stayed on my mind. And then a few months later, John called me up and said, "Hey, you know that thing that happened with your dad? A new paper came out, and I just had an idea for a device that I think would be really useful for emergency physicians, paramedics, people like myself that are managing these patients. It would be a wearable blood flow sensor that you could put over the patient's carotid artery and jugular vein and help us understand what's going on with the left and right heart without having to do an echo. And if we can make it a wearable, we can watch instead of holding an ultrasound probe and getting one picture, a snapshot. We can use it and get a real-time video or real-time monitor into how the patient's heart's responding at the bedside. And that would really change how I would manage patient care. That would tell me whether or not I'm doing the right thing for the patient. And in the case like my father, it would have told me that, fluids probably aren't the right solution here. I should be looking at other medications or a different approach. That's really what started the genesis of the company.
That's an incredible story that your co-founder, you met him when you were just starting out, undergraduate. Hundreds, thousands of students every September, they go into residence and they see who their roommates are or who's across the hall. And in your case, it was a lasting relationship that started a journey that culminated in Flosonics, and especially just the experience that you went through with your dad. And how that articulated the challenge that clinicians faced. So can you walk us through how the FloPatch technology works, like from the moment it's applied to a patient to when a clinician would get access to that data that you were talking about?
Yeah, sure. So the goal of the technology is to use the carotid artery and the jugular vein as a window for the left side of the heart, what's coming out of it, and then the right side of the heart, what's going back into it. And the way we do that is we have a ultrasound curtain. It's about 2.5 centimeters wide, kind of the width of a business card, that goes into the patient's neck and goes down about 4 centimeters. So deep enough that even patients with really big necks, you can get a really nice sampling of both the blood flow going from the left heart to the brain and the blood flow going from the brain back into the right heart. And then that data gives you that classic blood flow signature that you'd see if you ever did a vascular ultrasound or if you've had the whoosh whoosh from echocardiography. Same technology is just in a wearable form factor, so that the patch, it's about the size of an Apple Watch, sits right on top of the patient's neck, and then you get a beautiful signal of how blood flow is changing, and then that from the patch, using low energy Bluetooth, transmits the Doppler signal to iOS devices. So currently, right now, iPad Mini, and iPhones, you can download the Flosonics app and then be able to, in real time, see how blood flow is changing. And you can imagine with that platform or implementation, you can roll out almost any clinical setting, in the back of an ambulance, in the home care setting, in the emergency department, operating room. And our end users are typically nurses or paramedics that are caring for patients at the bedside, and then the care team, including the physician, guiding the clinical course with either standing orders, algorithms, or communication between the nursing team and the physician who's caring for the patient.
So is this technology currently in use in hospitals in Canada, in North America?
Yeah, to date, we've been on over 7,300 patients. We've got Health Canada clearance, FDA clearance, CE mark, about 20 hospitals in North America right now, and growing. Really great clinical adoption. Nurses, physicians have loved using it. It gives insights that you haven't had or you've had to work really hard for before, using either invasive technologies or complex ultrasound workflows. turns it into push button, simple peel and stick ultrasound. So it's really taken the learning curve down to a very, very easy level where a first-time user is able to go to the supply closet, grab the FloPatch, put it on the patient, connect to an app, and get the data that they need to make a clinical decision.
So congratulations on getting this technology into healthcare
Yeah.
settings, because that's no easy feat, especially in Canada and in Ontario specifically, getting new and innovative technologies adopted by our healthcare system. There are quite a few challenges and barriers. Can you talk a little bit about that from the perspective of someone who has gone through the process? And what guidance or advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that have medical devices and they're targeting getting those into our healthcare system?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's also a really interesting one in that, if I went back 10 years or, even 5 years ago, I would have thought that having the right clinical information for the physician or the nurse at the bedside to make a decision would be the primary driver of technology adoption. And I think that's more table stakes than, it has to do that. But on its own, that's not sufficient to get technology adopted in the healthcare market. There also has to be a business model that's compatible with the funding mechanism of the care pathway for that individual. And if you think about US market, the Canadian market, it depends, different funding model if the patient's at a primary care clinic, if they're in the emergency department, or if they're admitted to hospital. And the funding mechanisms for each of those are different. And they're different between Canada and the US. And the documentation that you need, the workflow that you need, the user experience that you need, the target of where that patient ultimately ends up can impact the reimbursement. So there's a whole other set of engineering that you need to do while you're developing the technology that has nothing to do with PCBs or acoustics or any physical engineering. It's understanding the healthcare system, the patient journey, how the reimbursement works, and how you're going to fit into that landscape without having to invent a new reimbursement model. If you can really deeply understand how the patient's cared for, where the reimbursement comes from, who's accountable and responsible for the outcomes of those patients, what do they care about, and what are the key performance indicators that they're being held accountable to, it can help you develop a business model, a reporting structure, a documentation pathway that can really help them have an easier time with what they're responsible for. And that really opens up the aperture for folks that are willing to adopt the technology. So I know that's long-winded, but it's a really important insight that you can't start too early, because it really does inform product design and data from the technology that you're building.
So right from the outset, these are things you need to be thinking about. And presumably as you build out your team, you need to build in that type of expertise from the earliest stages. It's not just about the technology, but it's also about, as you say, the business model and being able to navigate the system, and also being able to navigate reimbursement.
For sure. And then to that point, reimbursement, you can, depending on what the application is, you may have to start 2-3 years before you enter market working towards a code for reimbursement.
That's a long process.
But it's something that you can start in parallel with your technology development and your regulatory applications. And that all of what I just said transposes through new market entry into Europe, into Japan, into China. So all of them have their own uniqueness. And I think the part that I didn't fully appreciate when I started the company is, before you go to commercialization, there's a step that's called, some folks have called it market access, where it's, really mapping out this component of the business model and validating that it works, that it holds, that that the customer sees it the same way you do, that the payer sees it the same way you do, and that the technology meets the need that's the market is looking for.
So one can infer from that that developing a medical device like FloPatch requires significant investment. So how did you go about securing funding and bringing investors on board to support the commercialization of this device?
It's an incredibly important consideration right out of the gate. I was talking to a colleague last week about it, and for medical technologies, hardware in general, but specifically medical technologies in a regulated environment, it's not something that unless you're incredibly wealthy going into it, it's not something that you can bootstrap or just kind of build revenue to
Mhm.
get through. Like building the technology itself is a multi-million dollar, multi-year, multi-human year um, endeavor. And if you think about the costs required with that, there is certainly a real need for institutional support. So not to say that folks haven't been able to do it other ways, but my view early on was that we were going to require some med tech focused investors. So our first round of capital I would call friends and family, and we used that to kind of build a prototype, get
Mhm.
through, before the quality systems, before the, becoming a real company per se, but just to get the proof points and kind of de-risk the question, like, could you do it? So we did that as step one, and then we raised our first, I guess you call it a round with Genesis Capital and IGAM Partners here in Toronto.
Mhm.
They're both top tier early stage medtech VCs. Both have been amazing to work with, incredibly supportive of the company, high value add through both network and resourcing, governance. We became a much, much better company for having been involved with both of those firms. We then went on to use that round of funding to build the technology and get FDA clearance. Once that was done, we did a second round of financing for the market access, early commercialization that was led by a US VC, Arboretum Ventures. Again, it's like bringing a new teammate onto your team that's better and smarter than you in different ways, and you continue to get better. So Arboretum led our Series B, and that was to get that early commercial market access stage done. And then more recently, new investor, New Leaf Venture Partners joined our syndicate, and they're a Bay Area digital health medical device firm. And again, a new set of expertise joining that's around the commercialization of digital technologies. So really, really great investors, tremendous support from our board.
And good representation of, I would say, Canadian investors as well, which is not something that you um, often see in this space, especially at the later stages.
Yeah, I think that's an area that the entire industry has been looking to solve. I hope we're moving in that direction. Is establishing some later stage medtech VC for Canada, and there are firms that do it. Is they're just far few between, and like
Mhm.
everything, there's so many different factors that come into play that we'd probably need 10x of them to satisfy the number of opportunities that are around. And at the same time, having fewer of them also, requires companies like ours to be very capital efficient and, find the right timing to intersect with them. So it's a bit of serendipity, a bit of strategy, and a bit of timing.
So what was the timeline for kind of you've kind of outlined the pre-seed financing, then moving on to Series A, and then your successful Series B, just to give our listeners a sense of like how long does that take and those
Yeah.
milestones
So
when you're
context, I'm a first time founder, and I'd probably do it differently if I was doing it again with hindsight. Not that I don't think that we did it wrong, just differently.
how would you that's interesting. How would you do it
Yeah,
differently?
why don't maybe I can walk you through the phases, and then we can kind of think about what an alternate future or an alternate timeline could have looked like. But we did our A round, or sorry, our friends and family round, seed round in 2016. End of 2017 was our Series A. That was $4 million US round, 5 million Canadian. That took us to the start of COVID. And then COVID was kind of, you'd call it, probably a 2-year delay, just because we're at the spot where we needed to get into hospitals, do clinical validation work. And, during the COVID timeline, access to hospitals was pretty well impossible for Canadian companies. Kind of end of 21, we did the Series B. That was when things started opening up and you could get back into hospitals. And then in 24, we did the Series C. So we're kind of halfway through that Series C funding. And then the next one will be a growth round of capital for continued market expansion.
And so how would you have, in an alternate universe, how would you do it differently?
I mean, it initially had the first round of capital. We were very capital efficient, like incredibly capital efficient. And we prioritized milestones over time to market. And I think one of the things that I've learned is time to market is incredibly important on the investor side. And time to market on the revenue ramp once you turn commercial is the other metric that's incredibly important. And not that we've done a bad job of it, but one of my board members, when they joined the board with this last round of financing, kind of sat me down and said, Joe, like what you've done is, great job doing it as capital efficient as you have. Is like, I wouldn't have imagined that you get to this stage with the level of capital that's been invested. That's fantastic. But now you're moving into commercial, and you, instead of optimizing for milestones, should be thinking about optimizing for momentum. And those are two very different things. One's don't run out of gas. The other is how fast can you get going?
Yeah.
And, they're kind of different strategies. So I think, having the context of switching from the milestone or to being, okay, I'm okay spending more money faster because it's going to get us where I'm going.
To drive
or
growth.
Going sooner. Growth is, would be kind of the, if I was doing it again, a place where I think I could have probably made some different decisions sooner that would have got us further downfield. And, who knows? You can't go backwards, but, I think it definitely some perspective and learning that.
That's a great insight. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's something that, especially given the current environment, in terms of fundraising and investment that we are in right now, a lot of companies are probably struggling with that. The capital efficiency and runway and conserving cash, and then also fueling growth and momentum. So it's a tough time for that. So FloPatch is already being adopted in hospitals across Canada and the US. Can you share some of the feedback that you've heard? Like, are there any stories where FloPatch has made a significant difference in patient care that you can share with us?
Oh man, there's so many. Maybe I could share one that's kind of close to my heart. It's a bit of a sad story as well, but it was when we first got our initial prototype working, maybe 2019. We were really excited. It was the first device that we had end to end that was fully functional. We were going to a conference to show it off. It's actually one of the AdvaMed conferences, and it was in Boston that year. And our team had got an Airbnb, and we were sitting up on the little terrace outside of the house, and we were doing dry run demos with it. And there's 4 founders in the company. There's myself, John, who I mentioned earlier. And then when we started the company, I had a science background. John was a clinician. And then my brother had a accounting background, and we've always worked really well together. So he was right out of the gates. And then he had a finance roommate from university as well that he really respected. That we all founded the company together. While we were sitting around the terrace, passing the the prototype around and taking readings. I put it on and it sounded normal. And then my brother put it on, it sounded normal. And John put it on, it sounded normal. And we put it on. Our fourth co-founder's name was Sachin, and it sounded very different.
Oh,
Heart rate of 140, and this is a 31-year-old guy at the time. And we looked at each other. It's like, oh man, that doesn't sound good. I got to get checked out. And unfortunately, and he was diagnosed with leukemia and ended up passing away 18 months later. Very
oh,
aggressive, terrible,
oh my goodness.
tragic, but just an absolute incredible human being, but like an incredible co-founder, somebody that, you work closely with every day for years and years. It's one of those, people tell you in startups that you can never predict where
Mm,
your hurdle or your roadblock comes from. And you think, like, we've been at it 10 years now, and losing a co-founder
mm,
is one that I wouldn't have bet on. Unfortunately, there was nothing you could do about it. But in other instances, we have identified cardiac pathologies that are intervenable and have led to an intervention that's prolonged, reduced heart attack risk, prolonged life. But our main clinical use cases in sepsis and the sepsis septic care pathway. So if you go into any Sutter hospital or any Sinai hospital or any Bay Area hospital in California, chances are, and you're going in with sepsis, chances are you'll get a FloPatch on that will, from the time that you enter the hospital, help guide your fluid resuscitation from the time you get in through your discharge from the intensive care unit. And the benefit to that is reducing the chances that you'll get an episode of fluid overload, like what happened to my father with his post-surgical sepsis. So it gets you out of the hospital sooner, reduces your chance of 28-day mortality, reduces the cost of care for the hospital, identifies other potential comorbidities that are happening at the same time, and helps manage through them, things like heart failure. So really impactful for the patients that it's treating.
And literally, that could make the difference between life or death in terms of patient outcomes.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what's next for innovation in critical care monitoring, do you think? FloPatch is at the leading edge. What's next? What's at the bleeding edge?
Yeah, well, I think it's, a convergence of different macro factors. So, one is hospital to home, and you hear that a lot, but it's being able to provide higher quality of care, more acutely ill patients in less resource intensive settings. So that's something that, wearables enable. It's something that non-invasive technologies enable. It's something that fast and easy to use solutions promote.
Mhm.
So I think that's one theme that we're seeing across critical care, that is, technology is advancing. And I think we fit squarely into that macro environment, or that macro trend, pardon me. The other is wireless, and kind of fits with non-invasive, but the idea that if you've been in an ICU, there's just cables everywhere, wires everywhere, tubes everywhere, and when we show the nurse or the doctor for the first time that we've got a device that doesn't have wires, like, oh my god, why isn't everything like this? And I think there will be a move as wireless radios become more and more robust. I think the Bluetooth fallouts that I have now are 100 times less than they were when Bluetooth first came out 10, 15 years ago, right? So it's just, technology is becoming better and better. And as you get into, the medical setting, the robustness of that solution needs to be there. So I think that trend is something that you'll see more and more, like a move towards a wireless hospital room or intensive care unit. And then the third one that we're really focused on right now is predictive monitoring. So with the blood flow, or same thing with, if you're listening to a stethoscope, the same way a doctor can pick up, a trained doctor can pick up cardiac murmurs or valve dysfunctions through a stethoscope. A lot of hemodynamic pathologies or diseases manifest in the way that blood flows. So We're seeing that very, very clearly. Things like aortic stenosis, carotid stenosis, life-threatening organ dysfunction, patients that are in hemorrhage. If you know what you're looking for in the blood flow profile, you can see it. And anything that you can see visually, you can imagine a very clear way to develop machine learning or algorithms.
Okay, I was just going to say, so predictive analytics, that's AI. So AI and machine learning are a big deal in this space.
Yeah, for sure.
And has that changed the type of talent that you're looking to attract as you scale and grow?
I mean, it definitely informs it. I don't know that, it's something that we've been, front and center for the past 10 years for us. We've been thinking about it since we started the company, but the talent pool has certainly grown, and the types of folks and the experience that they have that's transferable to what we're doing has certainly increased as well. So I think it's on trend. It's something that's developing. And one of our angel investors was a world-renowned data scientist, has done all sorts of groundbreaking AI activities out of the Bay Area. And when he was investing in the companies, they're like, I get what you guys are doing right out of the gate. Really, really focus on data collection. But all of the other stuff, we'll figure that out. But just high quality data is what we need. And we've really built a robust back end into our data collection infrastructure from the start, so that every beat that's ever come out of a FloPatch has been captured in a cloud, at least sampling data. No patient identifying information, but all of the hemodynamics and ones and zeros from the sensor have been caught. So with the right accompanying data, we can make some really sophisticated inferences from the FloPatch data to be able to inform clinical management.
So your moat isn't just the intellectual property that you have; it's also the proprietary and unique data that really distinguishes Flosonics.
The last I checked, I believe we had something like 6 or 7 million, somewhere between 6 and 7 million unique labeled pulses or heartbeats from
Wow.
FloPatch. So, definitely enough to make a dent.
And I think that's something that's changing for medical device companies specifically. It's not only the deep tech and the device, but increasingly it's the data and the very unique data that the technology and the hardware enables. Well, congratulations on everything you've been able to accomplish with Flosonics, but especially the impact in just under 10 years. This technology came from an idea to be deployed in hospitals across North America, and it is literally saving lives every single day. So it's our pleasure and privilege at OCI to have been able to support you and Flosonics along the way. And it's a fantastic journey. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all the support along the way from OCI and a number of other funding agencies that have supported us. But, being part of the Canadian ecosystem and the support that we get to develop technologies is really world-class, and it makes a big difference for our ability to compete internationally. So thank you. And thanks to everyone else for their attention and their interest today.
Awesome. Thank you. That's it for this episode of Where Next Happens. To learn more about FloPatch and Dr. Joe Eibl's work at Flosonics Medical, visit flosonicsmedical.com. Where Next Happens is produced by the Ontario Centre of Innovation. This episode was produced by Jasmine Ratch, edited by Gaten Harris. Amanda Cupido is the executive producer, and I'm your host, Dr. Claudia Kreviazuk. Ready to take your idea to the next level? The Ontario Centre of Innovation helps innovators access the funding, mentorship, and resources they need to drive the future forward. Visit oc-innovation.ca/podcast to learn more.